Hello, everybody. You're reading with Jimmy. We're analyzing the Horla by Guy de Maupassant. This is the third in a series of four analysis. We're going to be analyzing the next part, which are pages 326 through 331. We left off in the last analysis where the doctor was putting the narrator's cousin under a hypnotic suggestion after he was showing her the white cardboard and being able to see the narrator in the white cardboard like a mirror. The doctor said in an authoritative tone, "You will get up tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, go to see your cousin, the narrator, at his hotel and beg him to lend you 5,000 francs, which your husband has asked you to obtain, and you will ask for on his next leave." And then he woke her up. So on the way back, after this curious seance, a seance, we'll define here down here a little bit. Here, let's go. Seance is a meeting at which people attempt to make contact with the dead, if you didn't know that, right? Through the agency of a medium. He calls it a seance, but it's not really a seance. It's a hypnotism going on. So he doubts it, and professional conjurers do much stranger things than this. I had known like a sister since my childhood, his cousin. Anyway, in the morning, the cousin, Madame Sable, shows up and asks him, she's very excited, nervous. A favor to ask you. What's the favor? I need 5,000 francs. Desperately. You need 5? Oh, come now. Yes, I do. My husband does, and he told me to get them. I stammered as I spoke to her. He was astonished. He's surprised that this is going on. Are they trying to make fun of me? So his first reaction is that somebody's trying to pull a fast one. And the request for her money was so distasteful to her that she was trembling with anguish, choking back sobs. She obviously seems like she's being forced to do this. And the narrator knows she's extremely rich. So he goes and says, "What? Do you mean to say that your husband can't lay his hands on fire? Come now, think. Are you sure that he told you to ask?" So he's doubting what he's hearing. He's trying to throw doubt in her mind. She hesitated, and then she said, "Yes, I am." She's agonizing, torment. She's being, the more did he tell you that in the letter? He's testing her, probing her. And the more he does that, the more he's doing to her what his imaginary creature or whatever in his mind is doing to him when he was back home. He's tormenting her. And so she plucked enough courage to lie. "Yes, he told me." But then, what? Did he write you? It's the letter this morning. Can you let me see it? No. I burnt it. She's obviously in distress. "So your husband is in debt?" She hesitated and then murmured, "I don't know." And I said curtly, "Well, the fact is, my dear cousin, I can't lay my hands on 5,000 francs just now." And she let out an anguished cry. Please, get the money for me." She grew more and more excited, clasping her hands. Before we go on, I want to point out a couple of things they referred to. Mesmer is a German physician with interest in astronomy. They talk about the Mesmer school, hypnotism, etc. And then I want to put a quote on your notepad. This is from Hermann Hesse Steppenwolf. Okay, so Hermann Hesse in the book called Steppenwolf, and Jimmy may read this. He says, "You may develop the game of your life and lend an animation. You may complicate it and enrich it as you please. It lies in your hands. Just as madness, in a higher sense, is the beginning of all wisdom, so is schizophrenia the beginning of all art and all fantasy." What do you think Hesse meant by this? What do you think Hermann Hesse meant by Hesse, whatever you want to say? What do you think he meant by this? You may develop the game of your life and lend an animation. That's a beautiful sentence, isn't it? You can develop your life. You may complicate it, enrich it. It lies in your hands. But then he adds this: madness, in a higher sense, is the beginning of wisdom. Schizophrenia, the beginning of art and fantasy. You have to look up schizophrenia. You might want to look up wisdom, what that is. And when he says madness is wisdom, there's an interesting theory about opposites, love and hate. If you think about emotions like love and hate, those are probably two of the most powerful emotions that a human being can have. And what we're witnessing here in this first person narration is, in fact, a lot of high powered emotions from the narrator, now from his cousin, as written by, of course, the first person narrator. And he's interpreting what his cousin said, and he's putting it in his diary, and we have to believe him if the story is going to really make any sense. And I don't think the narrator is lying to us. I don't know if you've detected any lies in what he's saying, but right now I can't detect that. So what does madness have to do with wisdom? Well, love and hate are very powerful. And if you think about them, if you really, really, really love someone, I mean, you almost lose your mind, don't you? You just, it's a powerful emotion. It's the same thing with hate. If you really, really, really hate, well, what is wisdom? Wisdom means being wise, right? If you look it up, but what does that mean? You're wise. What does that mean? If you really want to study wisdom, read Zen, right? Study Confucius. I used to have a saying in my office, a day without work is a day without food. That people thought I was crazy, but there's I'm going to talk about that when we finish the therapy of work. But madness, what is madness? That's what we're going to try to define too. Certainly this guy, the narrator, is acting mad when you put, black coal around your face to prove that you're not drinking from a carafe. You're just crazy things are going through this guy's head in this diary, right? It sounds like he's mad. But on the other hand, there's some wisdom. There's some little glimpses of wisdom in what he says every now and then. And I've pointed that out to you. Schizophrenia is a different thing. Schizophrenia is, the psychologists will tell you, is a psychotic condition, right? It's a split personality, or you've heard people, you're schizo. Well, it's the beginning of all art and fantasy. Why does Hesse say that? Well, my guess is that it's because it frees your imagination. You can read the Horla as a plain, we're going to talk about this at the end, a plain, simple horror story. You don't have to read it as a person descending into madness. You can read it as a horror story. This is a horror story. Oh, so it's a creature. It's unbelievable. That's a superficial reading. Jimmy would say it's superficial. That doesn't mean that you can't read it like that. And I applaud you. There it is, if you read it like that. But the fact of the matter is that a classic like this is deeply layered with meanings, not just a horror story. And it's the same thing with art and fantasy. You have to imagine the person, the Maupassant, who wrote this, just for a moment. I know, Jimmy, you said don't go outside the story. I'm not. I'm saying let's use our imagination for a moment. The guy who can capture this in words. If you remember the first paragraph, I told you this is some of the most beautiful writing I've ever read, even though it's translated. To put this down on paper, you have to have one heck of imagination, I would say. Either that, or if you've experienced it or come close to it. And I know sometimes some people who are listening to me, when they go to sleep, deep down, when you think about it, sometimes you really start thinking about this. Why am I here? What is this? Why am I here? What's going on? In any case, what is this doctor talking about here? He's, what is the doctor talking about? We're going to find out, right? Think about what Herman said. By the way, not that I want to go outside the story Steppenwolf, but Hermann Hesse, if you read about him, was undergoing psychotherapy with a very famous psychologist named Carl Jung, who you should also, Jung, who you should also really think about and study. In any case, so the doctor in this page will reverse the suggestions. She's got an irresistible order. The tone of her voice changed as she spoke. She wept. She stammered. She's being tortured. I beg you, I implore you, I have to have it. So he takes pity on her. He says, you'll have it later today. Oh, thank you, etc. So, do you remember Dr. Perrin? Put you to sleep? Yes. Well, he ordered you to come here. He's telling her the truth. 5,000 francs from me this morning. You're obeying. She thought about this and she says, because my husband wants the money. So she's so convinced from this. I have never been hypnotized. I don't know if you've been hypnotized, but Jimmy has never been hypnotized. I don't know if Jimmy wants to been hypnotized. Sometimes I think I'm under a spell. No, I'm kidding. But if you think about hypnotism and what it is, it's probably very powerful. The power of suggestion. Athletes go through this, the power of positive thinking. You know what I'm talking about? If not, you should research it. But what they do is they envision themselves doing the thing that they need to do. It's positive thinking. They're immersing themselves in their thoughts, and they're putting themselves in the situation and thinking it. They're almost, dare I say it, self-hypnotizing themselves into doing it. The power of suggestion, right? So he tried to convince her for a whole hour. He's doing this for a whole hour. So after I ran to the doctor's house, he was going out, but he said with a smile, "Now do you believe me?" So apparently what he didn't write in his journal back when they had this little episode where he put his cousin under is that maybe the narrator was doubting it. He was doubting because the doctor says, "Now do you believe me?" And the narrator says, "I have no alternative." She was already dozing on the chaise lounge, utterly worn out. The doctor felt her pulse, gazed at her, and he pulls her out of it. And she puts her to sleep and says, "Your husband no longer needs 5,000 francs. Therefore, forget you ever asked your cousin." And we've seen this on television shows, hypnotism and so on and so forth. Theoretically, I don't know. I cannot tell you from Jimmy's experience that it's possible. But I know enough about life to say it might be possible. What's a franc? It's about $1.11 in these days. He woke her up. I took my wallet out. Here's what you asked for. She was astonished. I just got back to the hotel and been unable to eat any lunch because of this experience. So he's been staying at a hotel, obviously, because he's not at this house. And he just can't sleep, but he puts it down. And remember, he's keeping the diary. The diary goes with the narrator. July 19th. A lot of people I told about the adventure made fun of me. So he tells people about it, but now they're mocking him. I don't know what to think. Maybe a wise man says perhaps. Well, maybe. See, that's what I just said, right? Not that I'm a wise man. Well, maybe hypnosis is possible. I don't know. He dines today at Bougleville and then spends the evening at the rowing club dance. No doubt everything depends on the place. To believe in the supernatural on the island of La Grenelle would be the height of folly, but on the top of Mount St. Michael. So he's saying this: we fall irresistibly under the influence of our surroundings. Remember, we were just talking about madness and wisdom? We fall under the influence of our surroundings. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't think of a more wise statement than that. Maslow's hierarchy of needs comes to mind. If you don't know what that is, look it up. But the influence of your surroundings has a great impact on you. It does. If you're living, in a shelter home or whatever like that, that has a profound influence as opposed to if you're living someplace on the lake, on a lake or on the ocean, right? Surroundings impact you. Your friends impact you. Your reading impacts you. Your lessons impact you. Your teachers impact. Everything around you impacts you and influences you in ways you and I can only guess at. He comes home, all is well. He's back home. Nothing new, glorious. I spend my days watching the scene flow by. Think about that. I spend my days watching the river flow by. I was telling you about work, about the sign in my office. A day without work is a day without food. I want you to remember that. I don't have the time to watch a river flow by my days. I spend my days. I might have an hour for meditation to watch something, the road, the sky. I don't spend days watching a river flow by. All right? Maybe you do. August 4th. So he arrives June 30th. By August 4th, the servants are quarreling. Somebody keeps breaking glasses in the cupboards at night. My man blames the cook, who blames the linen maid. Okay. So I put some notes down here on these places. It's suburban commune. You can read them. This La Grenelle was a frog pond, literally. It was a cafe, bathing establishment in the county. It became extremely fashionable and popular, and numerous articles were devoted to it. Mount Saint Michel is a tidal island, mainland commune in Normandy, France. The island lies approximately a kilometer off France's northwest coast. So these are just little points in France to show you he's trying to put a connection between surroundings and the mental state of people. So August 6th, this time I am not mad. Uh-oh. I've seen it. I've seen it. I've seen it. 3 times he writes in his diary, he's seen it. Don't forget pronoun usage. See pronoun usage? I've seen it. I still feel chilled. And then he describes what he's seen. 2:00, he was standing in the rose garden. He sees a rose bend and break. One of the stems of the rose bends and breaks. A terrifying splash of red 3 paces from my eyes. I rushed madly to grasp it. There was nothing there. It had disappeared. So he's walking in, looking at a beautiful rose, which is what this is. And the stem bends and breaks in front of him. I rushed madly to grasp it. It's gone. Hallucinations. I was filled with a rage against myself for a sane, serious-minded man doesn't have hallucinations. What's a hallucination? Look at this. Jimmy wrote a big note for you. Hallucination is an experience involving the apparent perception of something not present. Hallucinations are false perceptions of sensory experiences. Some hallucinations are normal. Did you know that? When I read that, I was overjoyed. Some hallucinations are normal, such as those called by falling asleep or waking up. So when you're falling asleep, I don't know if you've ever done this, and Jimmy, you're sounding like a little nut. I'm not. Try to watch yourself falling asleep next time. It's very difficult, but if you start going to sleep, suddenly you fall asleep and you dream. I told you perhaps in this or a different reading that we're dreaming at least 3 times a night. So dreams are hallucinations, aren't they? They're not real. And yet, sometimes you wake up and say, wow, did that seem real? Well, that was a hallucination, wasn't it? Well, Jimmy, that's not what he's talking about here. He's talking about something he saw when he's awake. Okay? Sometimes when you're awake, they're saying chemical reactions or abnormalities in your brain cause hallucinations. Before that, others may be a sign of serious conditions like schizophrenia and dementia, according to the Cleveland Clinic. In your brain causes hallucinations are typically a symptom of psychosis-related disorder, particularly schizophrenia. There's the schizophrenia word, right? The split personality. But they can also result from substance use. I am not a substance user, and I hope you're not either. Substance use, we can talk about this at another time, but when you take substances, sometimes you start saying things that are not there. Now, Jimmy, how can you say that? You just said you're not a substance user. Well, I didn't say I'm not. I said I'm not a substance user. Doesn't mean I didn't use them in the past, the far past. The point is that hallucinations, things that aren't there, you dream, that's not there, but sometimes they're very real. So I want you to consider what he saw in the garden. He saw a rose bend, snap, and it's not there. Did he see it? Was he under the influence of a drug? Was it this creature, it? He saw it? think these are very important considerations to understand this story. Okay, let's go back. But was it really a hallucination? So he's asking himself, mad people who are mad, who are nuts, let's say, just crazy. They don't say, did what I see really happen? So he's obviously, something's going on in his brain to have him question that. I turned around to look for the stem, and I found it right away on the bush, newly broken, between the other two roses and still on the branch. So it's there. Then I came back into the house utterly appalled. 4. Here's his conclusion. I am certain now, as certain as I am, that night follows day, an invisible creature exists beside me, which feeds on milk and water, which can touch things, pick them up, move them, which is therefore endowed with a material nature, imperceptible though it may be to our senses, and which is living like myself under my roof. I don't know how he got to that conclusion, but that's his conclusion. Now, if you're reading it as a horror story, well, all right, it's the invisible being. But if you're reading it as a man going, mad, a man going mad, M-A-N, M-A-D, then you can clearly see that this is a descent. This is a step towards madness. Because experience, reality, by the way, I remembered the name of the movie that I referred to with the good and bad sergeants that I told you I would remember by this reading. And the name of the movie was Platoon, where they had the good and bad sergeants, and the bad sergeant said, I am reality. Remember that? If not, go back and look at the else. He's concluding that there's an invisible creature. Now, to you and I, let's just read it as a horror story, Jimmy. No. Let's think about this and just say to yourself, have you ever seen any ghosts? Have you ever seen an invisible being? No, of course not. So I would conclude that he's descending into being mad. And the gift of this story, the gift of the writer to us, is to help us understand madness. What does it mean to be mad, to be nuts, to be crazy, to be off? By the way, before I go on, we're all a little off, aren't we? Sometimes we get a little nuts, but we'll talk about that another time. August 7th, a peaceful night. He, notice the pronoun. It's not it anymore. It's not it. It's he. It's not she. It's not it. It's he. He drank the water, but he didn't disturb my sleep. I wonder if I am mad. I wonder. What do you think, ladies and gentlemen? I was afflicted with doubts about my sanity, such as I've had before, but detailed, well-founded doubts. He's writing in his diary. This is an extraordinary moment for readers to look at this troubled soul and saying he's troubled. He's doubting his sanity. I've seen some madmen in my time. I have known some who remain intelligent, lucid, even clear-headed at everything in life except one point. And they would talk clearly, blah, 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 and then their mind ran aground on the reef of their madness and was torn to pieces, scattered to the winds and sunk without a trace, raging in the sea, full of surging waves, squalls, which we call insanity. So he's very aware of madness and insanity, right? And when he says, I've seen some, this is an interesting thing. I don't know why I didn't mark it. Hold on. I've seen some madmen in my time. I don't recall ever seeing madmen. Have you? I mean, if I think hard, maybe I can remember some. I don't know. Maybe it was the guy I just saw walking down the street. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, he says sometimes they seem very normal. And then, except for that one thing, and then they go crazy, right? They go insane, whatever that means. That's classic schizophrenia, isn't it? Dual personality. I would certainly think that I was utterly and completely mad if I were not in full possession of my faculties, if I were not perfectly aware of my state of mind, and if I were not able to sound it and analyze it with absolute lucidity, clarity, right? That's a great statement, but I don't know if that's true of someone who is insane. An insane person would probably say that as well. I'm just saying, right? Must have taken place in my some unknown disturbance must have taken place in my brain. One of those disturbances modern physiologists are trying to examine and elucidate, explain. And this disturbance has presumably opened up a deep chasm in my mind. He's self-diagnosing himself, isn't he? Similar phenomena occur in dreams when they take us through the most improbable phantasmagoria. What is that? A sequence of real or imaginary images like those seen in a dream. Phantasmagoria, right? Okay. One of the imperceptible keys of my cerebral keyboard is jammed. That's a nice way to put it. My cerebral keyboard is jammed. He's got a sense of humor, this narrator. Sometimes after an accident, a man loses his memory for proper names. This is true. What's that called? Amnesia, right? The localization of various divisions of the mind has now been established. And you know this as well. They can tell you which side of the brain does what, left side, right side. And we're going to stop part 3 of our analysis right here. And I want you to think about this because there's this. I wrote down here, the last note I gave you is this poor guy. I hope through the full reading of the text and also these analyses, that you're starting to feel some empathy for the narrator. Unless if you're reading it as a horror story, you should still feel sorry for the guy, right? Because he's undergoing just a tremendous amount of torture and horror and just anxiety. Not unlike dementia. Now, why do I bring this up? Because before we finish our 4th analysis, we're going to talk about the mind and what people's minds are like. And dementia, you hear about these days. This is early. This is 1887, I believe I said it was. But they knew about these things, but they didn't know about these things. I was just at the dentist today, and I thought I had a cracked tooth. And it's not a cracked tooth. He says, it looks the same, but maybe you had a root canal on that tooth and, a crown. So maybe the root canal has gone south or whatever. We can have it evaluated because the techniques of endodontists today are very different than 10 years ago, or whatever, because this is an old root canal. That makes perfect sense. That makes total perfect sense, doesn't it? That the techniques today are different than before. Well, I'm sure dementia existed in 1887. But what is dementia? It's the loss of cognitive functioning. Thinking, remembering, reasoning, to such an extent it interferes with a person's daily life and activities. Some people with dementia can't control their emotions and their personalities may change. I'm not saying that the narrator has dementia. I'm not saying that the narrator has anything. I am saying that the narrator is experiencing symptoms that can lead to a diagnostic of dementia, but because we don't know, they didn't know, we don't know, the writer, Maupassant, is giving us a glimpse through the narrator of what's going on in a human mind. It's like if I asked you all to keep diaries now for the next month. Start writing down everything you thought about. Don't worry about the punctuation. Don't worry about anything. Just write about your feelings, your doubts, what you did today. And then 30 days from now, you reread what you wrote. I guarantee you, absolutely. In fact, I'll bet you that you won't believe what you wrote. You won't. Not only do you change every day, but circumstances changing every day. And you're taking it from a guy who kept a diary from the time he was 17. He tore some up, but I've kept diaries. And the discipline of keeping a diary cannot be overemphasized. Writing down what you think, how you think, what you do, and then going back and rereading it clarifies. Now, I don't know if this narrator went back and reread what he wrote, because he might frighten himself and say, oh my God. But you already know what the end of the story is, I hope. In any case, have some pity for this guy, because he's undergoing a tremendous amount of stress, through whether it's a physical condition or whether it's really an alien being haunting him. I don't know. You've been reading with Jimmy. This is part 3 of the analysis of the Horla by Guy de Maupassant. We've got one more analysis, and hope you enjoy it. Thanks. Send me your emails, jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com, jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com. Thank you very much. Take care.